Okay, well, everyone, it is a little past 1, so I think we should go ahead and get started on our virtual journey to Ireland with Jim Wilson. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Hopefully you can all see this lovely shaggy looking cow here. So welcome everyone to another edition of Armchair Explorations. Just a bit of housekeeping before we begin. We are going to mute all of you, so please keep yourself muted throughout the presentation. It really helps things run smoothly and makes the sound quality a lot better. So if you do have any questions during the presentation for either Jim, or if you have technical difficulties, please use the chat function. If you take your cursor and hover towards the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little
in Georgia, in the new place.
At the bottom. All right, somebody's unmuted. You'll see a little speech bubble at the bottom, and we'll be monitoring that. You can just type your question in. We'll be monitoring that. If you have any technical difficulties, we'll be able to help you out with that. And then also, we will save questions for Jim towards the end, and then we'll have a little Q&A session. Please note, Jim's internet connection is a little bit spotty today. So there may be some delay between the slides. There may be some frozen screens every once in a while. So that's completely normal. And unfortunately, there's not much we can do about it. So please just bear with us. And it's still going to be a great presentation, no matter the technical issues that we experience. Okay, so we'll get started. Thank you all for joining us today for Birds and Other Wildlife of Ireland with Jim Wilson. Jim is joining us from Cobh, County Cork, Ireland, where it's quite late in the evening, so we really appreciate him taking the time to be with us here today through the magic of technology. A little about Jim. He's a highly respected ornithologist and ecologist with more than 40 years of birding experience all over the world, from the Arctic to the Antarctic and pretty much everywhere in between, I think. He's also written a number of books, including the best-selling Birds of Ireland, a Field Guide. He's produced 2 educational DVDs. He's also a co-producer of a phone app, a guide to Antarctic wildlife, which is pretty cool for us technically challenged people to be an app creator. He's also involved in a lot of national and international conservation projects. He was a national chairman of Birdwatch Ireland and is a former director of the Irish Whale and Dolphin Group. And he has put together a fantastic presentation today with wonderful images all about the wild wonders of his home country, Ireland. So I'm going to now hand things over to Jim and stop sharing my screen, hopefully here. Sorry, guys. Or Jim, do you want to just start sharing and
yeah,
see
I'll share my screen.
Takes me out. Though this puffin is really cute.
Yeah, I do.
Let me stop share. There we go.
Oh, I hope that's my one.
That's you, and I'm gonna mute myself and sit back and relax.
Okay. Well, folks, I'd like to welcome you all aboard this evening for a little jaunt across what myself and Tom Sharp, my good friend, who many of you know from Scotland, myself and Tom refer to Ireland and Scotland often as the Celtic Fringe. We're part of the Celtic Fringe here on the west coast of Europe. And this evening, I'm just going to give you a taste of the sort of thing we would find, hopefully, when we do our Wild Ireland and Scotland trips next May, I believe. So this is a kind of a taster for that. For some of you who, I think you've already done it, so it'll be a nice little recap as well. Before I forget, because I definitely forget it at the end, I'd like to thank Sonia and Caitlin, Robin and Kelsey back in the office for making all this possible. Without their hard work, these events just wouldn't happen at all. So thanks to all of you for your help in putting this show together. Without further ado, I think we'll lash into it, as I say, in this part of the world. I'm assuming everybody is hearing me. That's good. So I had thumbs up there. Perfect. Right. So if I can get my first slide. Oh, here we go, folks. According to this, I'm sharing my screen, but it's not giving me 1 second. So that's it. There we go. There we go. All right. So yes, birds and other wildlife of Ireland and Scotland. Just orientation of, as I always do at the start of my talks. This is Western Europe, pretty much all of Europe actually. And this is the area we're talking about. Those two islands with a lot of little islands off the mainland of Europe. We're right on the edge of the Atlantic. So that influences everything we see here in Ireland and Scotland. We get the Gulf Stream all the way from the Gulf of Mexico, which warms us up a little bit more than we would be otherwise. And in Southern Ireland, where I am, and also along Southern Britain, we get plants to grow that would not normally grow at this latitude because of the Gulf Stream. So that has affected the wildlife that has come to inhabit these islands since the last ice age. In the last ice age, Ireland and Britain was pretty much covered in ice, almost totally. So pretty much everything we see in this part of the world today sort of came after the last ice age, which was about 18,000 years ago, when land started appearing out of the ice caps. So this is an idea of the type of trip we do. As we always say in when we're on the ships, this is only a guide. This isn't exactly what we might do because it's expedition travel, things can change. But this is the plan for next May, and it covers quite a few of the places that we've been covering over the years, with 1 or 2 new ones. So I'm going to kind of follow this track to give you an idea of the type of wildlife one could expect if one was doing a trip next year or any year. The wildlife will be there, and the sort of things you're likely to come across. And a little bit of geopolitics. Some of you are familiar with the geopolitics. Many I have found over the years are not. These islands here are often called the British Isles. But I'll just go through it and put you straight on that, because you're talking to an Irishman. You're listening to an Irishman this evening. This is Scotland, the bit in blue. This is Wales, the bit in red. I hope the slides are coming up fast enough for you, because we had a little bit of a problem with delay on the slides. So I hope they're coming through reasonably quickly. The yellow bit is England. Just that bit is England. And that's Northern Ireland. So politically, the island of Ireland, the one on the left, is split in two. 26 of the counties are in the Republic of Ireland, and the 6 on top are the ones that are they are politically belonged to the United Kingdom. So when you look at them together, what you get is, you can see where England is on the left, and then Britain, and then the United Kingdom is Great Britain plus the orange bit, which is Northern Ireland. So that's the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is technically not part of Great Britain. So the United Kingdom is the correct political term for all that area, ruled from London. Now, Ireland used to be part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland in total. But in 1922, we started our journey of independence, and therefore we're no longer part of Britain. So pre-1922, you would have been quite right in saying the British Isles, because politically both islands were British. But since 1922, if you want to keep everyone happy on the island of Ireland, I think Irish and British Isles, or British and Irish Isles, is probably the way to go. All right. So that's just a little bit of, it's a complicated little part of the world. It doesn't look like much when you look at it on the map. But yeah, politically, you can run into all sorts of things. So you'll have the euro when you're down in the Republic of Ireland, then you go to Northern Ireland and you're into the pound sterling, things like that. But you'll find that, you know, we all get on underneath it all. Everybody goes about their business and gets on really well, especially in recent years. We've had our troubles, but so is everywhere else, okay? You will not see anything like this on one of our trips, okay? This is what Jet usually referred to as a leprechaun, which is one of the little people. I've never seen one. And I must say from this photograph that the landscape looks more like North America than Ireland, to be honest, which is probably where you're more likely to see more of these than in actual Ireland itself. The pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, we always go looking for it here. And there's more to Scotland than bagpipes and the Loch Ness Monster and a kilt too, by the way. But they're the sort of ideas that come into people's heads when they think of Ireland and Scotland. Leprechauns and Scotsmen running around playing the bagpipes with a kilt on. Great place for picking up some nice things, such as arm sweaters and things like that. And we also have the drink. We have a lot of people like to go to the pub when they're here. A lot of people would drink Guinness. They've heard of Guinness, but there's another one called Murphy's, which is actually the better one. Because it's brewed here where I live in County Cork. It's a better pint. But they're both stouts and Ireland is famous for them. And then there's the thorny subject of whiskey. Whiskey with an E is distilled in Ireland. Without an E, because they couldn't spell it properly, is what you get with Scottish whiskey. And Scottish whiskey is distilled a little bit quicker than the Irish stuff. They've got a better marketing department. A lot of people that travel with us prefer Scottish whiskey, but Irish whiskey is the original. It comes from the Irish word ishka, meaning water. Ishka Baha is the full name, which is the water of life, just like aquavit. And that was sort of got kind of corrupted into the word whiskey from ishka. So that's where that comes from. Now, when you're in Ireland, don't worry about the weather. You don't come to the Ireland and Scotland trip for the weather. There will be weather, it just mightn't be sunny. But it makes the place what it is. Super green, really nice. Beautiful landscape, and you know, once you're dressed up for it, it's good fun. This is the type of landscape that has been shaped by the weather here. Beautiful rolling hills, lots of small fields and hedges, things like that. And in May, which is when we're normally there, you get the gorse. That's the green and yellow. See that yellow flowered? It's all over the place in Western Ireland. It's a member of the pea family. I'll show you close up in a minute. We get to see it a bit more. Now, Ireland is often referred to as the land of saints and scholars, because early Christian times, you had a lot of the religious Christianity in Europe was at the edges, and Ireland was at the center of that. And it resulted in the books like the Book of Kells, which you can see if you go to Dublin, which is a magnificent illuminated manuscript. And it was Columkill, or St. Columba, who actually started that in Iona, which we go to in Scotland, and then brought it back to Ireland. So you'll see a lot of ruins of early churches and things like that. And when you go to Iona, you will see the Iona Abbey itself, which is, this isn't the original abbey, but it's 6th century is when Saint Columba founded the monastery there in the 6th century. And then you got the one off the west coast of Ireland, the Skelligs. This featured in the the Star Wars, and it's just an amazing thing. As I say, built between 600 and 800 AD. It's 12 kilometers off the west coast of Ireland. The monks thought they were going to get closer to God by being out there. But we actually do a ship cruise around it, and you can see this monastery, monastic settlement for itself. And almost all of what you see is original, right out on the western coast of Ireland. The Skellig Rocks, Skellig Vigil or Skellig Michael is this, and just next door is Skellig Biog, or Little Skellig, which has over 25,000 pairs of gannets on it. And we go see that as well while we're there, but more about the gannets later on. May, great time. The May tree comes out. This is hawthorn. You have it in North America as well. Beautiful tree. It's in full bloom. And it's considered a superstitious tree where not the leprechauns, but the fairy people or the little people live. You'll find these trees in the middle of cultivated fields in Ireland as you drive along, or as we sail along or walk along, and you'll see that the tree is out in the middle of a pasture land, and it's just there on its own. It's considered bad luck to cut down one of these trees, which can live for a couple of 100 years, because you will upset the fairy folk, and it brings bad luck to do that. So they leave them where they are. Lots of sheep and stone walls, plenty of stone walls. They're everywhere. And of course, when you don't have anything else to make a boundary out of, and you've got land that's really, really poor, what you do is you clear the land and you make these little fields by removing all the stones out of it. So what do you do with the stones? You build the walls with them. And these are dry stone walls, so there's no cement in them, which means that they actually don't fall down even in the strongest gales we get, because there are holes through them. There's no cement, so the wind can blow through the wall rather than up against it and knock it down. So hopefully we'll get a chance to see some of those on our trip. So again, along the west coast of Ireland and along the west coast of Scotland, which is where we concentrate our time, you will see landscapes like this for sure. You will come across cemeteries here and there, and what you get there on a lot of the Irish ones is the high cross type symbol there on the top of the headstones. The high cross, a lot of them were early Christian. Some say they came from Iona, but when Ireland was getting towards its independence, even in death, you wanted to show that your loyalty and allegiance was to Ireland. And so you had your headstone made with a high cross on it, like these ones here in Ballinskelligs, which is very near the Skellig Rocks. Then you have contrasting little towns and villages, like Portrush here in Northern Ireland as you move north. And then you'll have the cliffs of Antrim, the only place we have chalk in Ireland. And then you have the Giant's Causeway. The Giant's Causeway, fantastic place to visit. Quite an amazing piece of geology with the basalt columns. Really incredible. And we'll get to see them as we go. Now, I always know, because I'm always out with Tom Sharp, our geologist. He's always on these trips with us. And I always know when we reach Scotland, I don't even have to check the calendar. I don't have to do anything, because he transforms himself into a real Scotsman with his kilt. So Tom is a very proud Scotsman, and here he is striding out with his kilt. So that's when I know we're in Scotland, because to be honest, the landscape and the people of the northern part of the island of Ireland and into Scotland are very similar indeed. And then in Scotland, you'll get to see things like, this is Fingal's Cave on Staffa, which is fantastic, great spot. Magnificent basalt formations. In fact, this same age as the Giant's Causeway, and some might argue even better than the Giant's Causeway. I think it's fantastic, and that's Fingal's Cave, right down on the right hand side. Ring of Brodker, you're going to see lots of archaeology. One of the largest stone circles in Britain. This is on Orkney, which we visit. Skara Brae, which is as the Stone Age. These amazingly preserved Stone Age houses, which again these were not rebuilt. These are original, and they're almost 4,500 years old. Every time I go to see them, I can't believe they're actually 4,500 years old. Quite incredible. They got covered in sand. They were deserted, and they got covered in sand. And in the 19th century, a storm exposed one of the houses, and that scale house in the background. It was the people living there came down and had a look, and they could not believe what they found. And it's so well preserved. It's one of the highlights of the trip. This is on Orkney, Skara Brae. Moosa Brock. You get Moosa Brock, which is an Iron Age structure. They think it might have been a dwelling or a fortification. It's nearly 2,000 years old. As you can see from this slide, it's not always sunny, so you got to come prepared. But once you're prepared and you're wrapped up fine, there's something really nice about the changes in the weather. It gives you a great feeling, great sense of being somewhere different. And we always have a great trip, regardless of the weather, on the Ireland and Scotland trip. And this is what it looks like from the inside. It's wide open on the inside, but amazing the way the stones have been built up. And it's a double skin. There's 2 layers of stones. Quite amazing, 2,000 years old. And again, you get a good leg stretch. Zegrum usually offers short to medium and the long walks wherever we can. So people of varying ability and none can do something. Wherever we can, we get out, and that's always a great opportunity to look at the wildlife and see the birds. So what happens sometimes is that the people who are actually sitting down and taking it really leisurely can often see some of the best wildlife, because sometimes it's better to sit and watch and wait. The flowers you'll see in May is brilliant. It's a great time, really great time to be there. And this is the gorse close up, as a member of the pea family. Really beautiful. And it's very yellow. It really, really covers the landscape. There's an old Irish saying that when the gorse is in bloom, kissing is in fashion. But what they'll forget to tell you is that there's different varieties of gorse, and it's nearly always in bloom. So kissing is always in fashion in Ireland and Scotland. Primroses, which are fantastic. Kidney vetch, orchids, all beautiful. Good time of year to see them. We get lots of orchids on these trips. So it's not just the birds. Lady's smock, which is beautiful. And then you have the sea thrift or sea pink, which is absolutely fantastic. And it can just carpet, especially along the sea cliffs, really beautiful. This is it close up, really nice. And then you have the bluebells, which are super, really fantastic. Again, bluebells are often associated with woodlands, but we get them quite a bit on the coast, right out, no trees anywhere, and up come the bluebells late April and early May. Really fantastic. And they're a gorgeous flower, absolutely fantastic. Really, really beautiful. Here's one in the morning sun. So you don't have to have a big long lens for getting wildlife shots. There's always plenty right at your feet, especially insects and flowers and things like that. And of course, where you do have the flowers, you'll end up with insects like the common blue butterfly, which is a beautiful little butterfly that we get in Ireland and Scotland during May. The peacock butterfly, it gets its name from those eyes that on the wings, the false eyes that look a little bit like the peacock feathers. So that's the peacock butterfly, which you might see here too. So you often associate the brightly colored butterflies with the tropics, but people are often amazed at how colorful our butterflies and insects are on our trip along wild Ireland and wild Scotland. People often ask whether anybody is going to get stung. Is there anything that we've got to watch out for that's dangerous, that bites? Well, Ireland and Scotland, luckily, especially in May, has few, if any, insects that will bite you. You might see an early wasp like this, and they can give a sting, but I haven't been stung by one in over 30 years. If you mind your own business, they'll mind their own business, and everything will be fine. You might get some midges. We have mosquitoes, believe it or not. You get them all the way up to the Arctic. They just don't carry malaria. But we do have them. But in May, unless it's unseasonal, you won't be bothered by things like that. So here in Ireland and in Scotland as well, you're not usually bothered by biting insects, especially early in the season in April and May. You should be fine. But yeah, that's our wasp, or as we like to call it here, a wazzy. A wazzy, that's what we call it. If you got stung by a wazzy, you'd know all about it. So that's the wasp. Now, when you get to the reptiles, it's very easy for us again. We're on the edge of Europe, and the law of isolation by islands, biodiversity-wise, compared to mainland Europe, we wouldn't have anywhere near as many species of any family of wildlife. So as a result, we have just one species of lizard. So I don't have to go looking up any books. If I see a lizard, it's the lizard. That's plain and simple. Scotland can have one or two other species, but this is the lizard we normally see, about 12 inches long, 30 centimeters. This one is sunning itself on a rock covered in lichen, and we might come across them. Not very big. And of course, we don't have any snakes. And that's because St. Patrick drove them out of Ireland. And the real reason we don't have snakes is because Ireland became an island after the last ice age, before snakes and other creatures like that, other reptiles, made it as far as us. So we got cut off by water, and therefore then we couldn't get snakes or anything that couldn't fly coming across that easily. And that is the reason we don't have snakes. But we were always brought up as children in school to be told that it was St. Patrick who banished the snakes from Ireland, or drove them, as you can see from this slide here. Of course, when you get to Scotland, the largest reptilian creature you're likely to see, if you're incredibly lucky, is the Loch Ness Monster. Now, we don't usually go to Loch Ness, but there are stories of sea monsters and lochs and tarns all across Scotland in particular, but also in Ireland. So you got to keep an eye out for things like that as we go north. When we get to the mammals, the bunny rabbit, of course, here sunning itself next to a stone wall. As I told you already, lots of stone walls. The rabbits were brought in by the Normans when they conquered England initially, and then they came across to Ireland as well. And they brought the rabbits with them as a source of food and pelts to be used in clothing. And the rabbits escaped, and you find them everywhere now, absolutely everywhere. The bunny rabbit, and here's one close up, in amongst some sea scurvy or scurvy grass, which sailors used to eat for vitamin C. That's the white flower it's sitting in. Beautiful. So rabbits, no problem there. Sheep by the thousands, and you might get lucky to see one of these Soe sheep. If we get a chance to go to St. Kilda, it's a very good place to see them. They're almost like a goat, but they are a sheep, and they actually love eating seaweed. They're really tough sheep. You often see them down on the shoreline and eating seaweed. That's the Soe sheep, and this one obviously has its name tags in because the herd on St. Kilda is monitored, because they're a relatively rare breed, but you might get to see some of them. Highland cows. Of course, in Scotland, they often call them coos rather than cows. You can ask Tom that, the coos. Whereas we would say cow in Ireland. In Scotland, they'd say coo. But these are Highland cows, this one here. And of course, don't ever forget the Shetland pony. When we go to Shetland, which we do on this trip, we will make sure that you get to see a Shetland pony in Shetland. There's plenty of them to be found up there, the Shetland pony. And of course, this one I really want to go out for. Tom will be keeping a close eye out for this, the haggis. May is good time. It's the season. They don't really start hunting them till August, so that they're a lot easier to see. They're more confiding, and of course there are two races of haggis. There's the clockwise haggis and the anti-clockwise haggis, because they've only 3 legs and one is much shorter than the other 2. So depending on which side they have the short leg, they can only go around the mountain. They usually like mountains and uplands the one direction. Otherwise they fall off. So I've seen the anti-clockwise haggis, but I'm hoping to get the clockwise one on the next trip. But Tom will be looking out for the haggis. He'll know haggis country when he sees it. This is a very rare photograph. They're often quite shy, especially in May. So I won't promise anything. We never promise anything when it comes to the wildlife on this trip. You know that on any trip, because isn't that the old saying, never work with children or animals? Some of us unfortunately have to do that for a living. So we'll see how it goes. Then you get to the seals. Now we're getting on to the sea creatures. And these are grey seals all hauled out. We should see some of them. Here's one checking us out. Just making sure we're staying on land and not coming into their territory. Beautiful creatures, absolutely fantastic, the grey seal. And as you can see, folks, I've managed to talk about anything but birds, and we're getting well into the talk. But I did say we were going to talk about other wildlife as well. They're hard to resist. This is the common seal or harbour seal, and here they are hauled out as well. The grey seal checking us out. Big long nose on the grey seal. They're beauties too. So we've harbour seals and grey seals. And then there's another creature we got to look out for, especially in Scotland, that's coming up in a minute. Firstly, we have the dolphins. We have the common dolphin. When we're traveling between the different landings on our daily trip northwards through the west coast of Ireland and Scotland, be out on deck, because Ireland and Scottish waters, fantastic for wildlife, sea life, birds, but not only that, whales and dolphins too, like this common dolphin coming over to check us out. And the bottlenose dolphins, we see them quite regularly too. They will come and check us out. And even humpbacked whales, we've had them on a few occasions. So you don't have to go to the Antarctic to see humpbacked whales or Alaska. You might get them off the Irish or Scottish. There's a good number of them now coming every summer. The numbers have been building up over the recent decades. Basking sharks, well worth looking out for too, especially the west coast of Ireland and Scotland. And these were taken from the ship one evening when one came right up to us. They're the second biggest fish in the sea next to the whale shark. The basking shark, they can be up to 28 or 30 feet long. They're plankton eaters. You can see the gape on this one. The mouth is wide open and sort of sifting out plankton as it skims along just below the surface. That's the basking shark. So with a bit of luck, we might see one of those. We see them on most trips. Mind you, this view was great from the ship in nice clear water. This is the one I'm still looking for. This is called a Selkie. More of a Scottish animal than one from Ireland. Often it's females, but I think there are males as well. They're part seal, sometimes part fish, but mainly part seal and part human. And they can shed their skin and become wholly human. And then the humans find them irresistible. And then there's all sorts of stories about them, humans getting drowned or things like that, or dying of a broken heart. But I found this picture of one online. But there's one thing that I was a little worried about, is where the fur seal came from down in the bottom right-hand corner. You won't see fur seals on an Irish trip or Scottish trip. And I know Tom is delighted with that, because fur seals and Tom Sharp don't get on that well at all. So a bit of photoshopping going on. So I reckon this isn't a real Selkie, but keep your eyes peeled for one. Now finally we get on to the birds. And there are plenty of them, absolutely plenty of them. I'm just checking my watch there. I hope you're still hanging in there and the slides aren't misbehaving too much. So what have we got? We've got the crows. We have lots of crows in Ireland and Scotland. You'll see plenty of species along the way. And this one's the rook. And rooks nest in social groups, and you'll see them in May. And the term for the group of nests where they nest is a rookery. And rookeries are very noisy in April and May. And that's where the term, which you might have heard of in the Antarctic for the penguins, rookery of penguins, well, that name was given to the penguin colonies by English sailors who saw the colonies, heard them being very noisy, and it reminded them of the rookeries back home. And this is a rook. It's a type of crow. It's one of our bigger crows and very, very common. A scavenger, and like most crows, very, very clever. And this one's the jackdaw, a smaller bird. And again, you'd see these a lot, but these tend to be found more around human habitation. The rook is more of a country crow, even though it does come into towns and cities. The jackdaw, on the other hand, likes to nest in little crevices and trees, you know, old, where branches have fallen out. But since people started building houses, and particularly chimneys, the jackdaws love our chimneys. And there's not so many open fires now in Irish houses, so there are a lot of redundant chimney flues, and the jackdaws nest in them. But sometimes they'll nest in a chimney that's still being used in the winter, and they can build a very big nest. They throw down sticks till they get stuck in the chimney flue, and then they build the nest up to about within 1.5 feet of the top. And then they pop inside and they lay their eggs there, nice and safe. And they usually come back to the same nest year after year. But what most people have to do here, if they don't want the jackdaws to start nesting in their chimney pot, is they put a little cowl, a little wire mesh cover on it, and that keeps them out. But thankfully, because they're nice birds, there are so many old chimney pots on the houses. As we go around, especially you may even be in my hometown on the next trip, there's a lot of Victorian houses in our town, and anything up to 20 or 25 chimney pots. There was one or sometimes even two fires in the one room, so there was a chimney pot for each of them. And now there might only be one or two fires being lit, so the rest of them can be used by the jackdaws. So that's the jackdaw, another crow. This one you will definitely get used to seeing. It's an easy one, unmistakable. The magpie. This is the magpie. It gets the name pie, meaning two-colored, usually black and white. You've got piebald pony. You've got pied wagtail, pied flycatcher, pied little grebe. That's where the term is used. But the magpie, if you see one on its own, it can be considered bad luck. What you're supposed to do is bless yourself or wave to it to kind of cancel out the bad luck. But there is a saying which some of you have heard from me before, which is 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for boy, 5 for silver, 6 for gold, and 7 for a secret never to be told. And so that's what happens when you see them. Now, the first couple, it's 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, and 4 for a boy. So if you see 4 together, it may be someone you know or a relative who's expecting a baby is going to have a boy. If you just see 2, it means good luck. But then there's the Catholic version, which is 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for marriage, and 4 for a boy. And what they've done there is they've dropped the girl. You know, well, you can make what you like out of that. But yeah, there's 2 versions. Where 3 is for marriage or where 3 is for a girl, as in that the next baby born is going to be a girl. So that's the magpie, a member of the crow family, very distinctive and quite common. Almost every one of these I'm showing you, by the way, are ones that we should all see. Even if you don't have binoculars, you should still get to see most of these. And there's the magpie up close. It's such a beautiful bird, and the iridescence on the plumage, fantastic. Hooded crow is another one, often called the grey crow, and it too is a scavenger, and we should see lots of them. You get them all in many parts of Europe as well, but we'll see plenty of them. The starling, some of you are familiar with the starling, brought over. I think it released, the sort of legend goes that they were released in New York as part of a fanciful sort of endeavor by a fanatical Shakespeare person over there who wanted to release all the birds mentioned in Shakespeare in Central Park in New York. And it is said that's where you got your starlings and your English sparrow, or as we call it, the house sparrow, was from that. But they're native to this part of the world, and we really like them. And how could you not like a bird as beautiful as that? It's one sunning itself, a photograph I took in Scotland, but they're quite common and seen all over the place. And they get their name. Anything with ling, L-I-N-G, at the end of it usually means something small or a child. This one, starling, it really literally means a child of the stars. And I think it's a fantastic little story that's where they came from. Because if you look at the plumage, like on this bird here, it looks like a night sky with loads of stars on it. Lots and lots of stars. And obviously people with a really vivid and fertile imagination a long time ago reckoned, I wonder is that where they came from? Because in nature, people often, they read things into them that they were signs from God, a lot of it, that things like that were just giving them a hint, giving them an indication of where they came from or what they're good for, to like a lot of the plants, any of the plants with the ending in W-O-R-T wort or wort, usually means it's herbal or medicinal. And they often thought that if the plant looked like an organ of the body, then that plant was good for curing the ills of that organ, which means we've got spleenwort here, we've got liverwort here, things like that. And navelwort is another one. So yeah, whereas this one is starling, because the story was that they came from the stars. They fell from the stars and turned into birds, the starling. And they like to nest in crevices. Here's one in a stone wall on the Aran Islands off the west coast of Ireland. So again, you're hitting Ireland and Scotland at the best time of year. A lot of birds singing, holding territory, starting to rear young. It's really fantastic. The blackbird, as you can see from this slide, when you look at them closely, they're not always black. This one is growing new feathers. It's becoming an adult with its yellow banana colored beak, and generally all dark. But this is the blackbird. A lot of blackbirds, the name traveled over to North America and was used by English-speaking enthusiasts of wildlife. They started naming birds they saw over there with names that reminded them of the birds that they had themselves. Like the red-winged blackbird obviously must have vaguely reminded them of this bird, the blackbird. We don't normally have a description other than just calling it the blackbird, because we don't have any other over here in Ireland or in Scotland. And here it is singing its head off, beautiful singer from the top of the bush. And as I say, sometimes the beak is quite orange. Stunning bird. This is a male. The females are duller, mainly for camouflage when they're sitting on the nest. Its cousin, the song thrush, the beauty again, the lovely spotted chevron and spots on the breast and belly. Magnificent bird, the song thrush. And these are kind of mockingbird kind of size. They're kind of a medium-sized bird, you know, yay big. That's the song thrush. And we can't forget the wren. And yes, it's the wren. I know in North America you got a whole pile of wrens, all different types of wrens, winter wren and things like that. And we've just got one wren. You know, you've cactus wren and stuff. We just have the wren because there's only one wren species, again, in Ireland and in Scotland. And again, this time of year is the best time to see them. They're normally out of the way, but this time of year in May, when we go there, they're holding territory, and they're the noisiest of birds for such a small little bird, second smallest, one of the smallest in Europe. They're very, very noisy, and you'll see them all along the west coast. Really fantastic. And the tail sticking up in the air, which is brilliant too. Really, really nice. Here it is, the robin. I could spend all night telling you stories about these birds. It's considered the king of the birds, this one, but I'll keep that story for another night. And there's the sparrow. Again, from what I gather from talking to a lot of our Zegrum travelers, some of you don't like the sparrow, again, which was introduced to North America, but is native to Ireland and Scotland and other parts of Europe. There's a female and there's the male. Again, I think they're beautiful birds. And they've been declining here, believe it or not expanding in range, partly because of changes in farming practice. And also modern buildings aren't as suitable for nesting in as the older buildings from which it gets its name, a house sparrow, because they used to nest in the thatched roofs. That's the grass covered roofs. That's the house sparrow. And the robin, where would you be without the robin? This is the real robin, folks, for those of you who have not already heard me put you straight on that. This is the European robin. It's much smaller than the bird you call a robin. And it's a cousin. It's not very closely related. It's close enough, but not very close. Whereas your robin, the American robin, is actually a proper card-carrying member of the thrush family, whereas our robin is not. But a beautiful bird, and again, come in May, and they'll be singing their heads off. You'll get good views of them. They're pretty cheeky when they're in the garden. They come right up to you. I've had them stand on my boot, on the fork, the garden fork, looking for worms and stuff like that. No fear. Either that or they're just totally stupid. It's one or the other. But I think most people like to think that they're fearless. They don't see us as a threat. So a gardener's friend for sure is the robin. As we say, they'd practically talk to you. So they would. Here it is singing it's with us. And the breast isn't really red, as you can see from this shot. It's more like an orange red or an orange. But it's still known as the robin redbreast. More, I think, from the American bird than our bird. But definitely it ended up as red on Christmas cards and things like that, where you see them a lot. Blue tit, as beautiful as any bird from the tropics, very common. Hopefully we'll get to see some of them. Wood pigeon, big pigeon, and you should see lots of them. And when you get nice close-up views with that white neck patch, they're fantastic. We have other couple of species of pigeon and dove in Ireland, but this will be the main one you're likely to see. The pheasant, of course, same as the US, introduced species, the pheasant. But again, we see lots of them on the trip. A lot of gun clubs, hunting clubs release them in pretty big numbers in some parts, and some of them can be very, very tame. This is a male pheasant, which we should see. The finches, then you've got the chaffinch, which is one of the most common, really beautiful. Goldfinch, here on a teasel, stunning bird. Again, you've got goldfinches in North America, and this is where they get their name from, the original goldfinch. I'm going to be totally biased and say it's by far more beautiful than any of the North American goldfinches. But I'm sure we'll agree to differ on that. And next we have the linnet. Beautiful bird. Beautiful flush of red on the breast and on the forehead. These used to be kept in cages as songbirds in many parts of Ireland and Scotland. You often see old photographs from the 19th century, and they'd have a little cage outside the house, each of the houses, and it was usually a linnet or a goldfinch that they had. Beautiful bird. And another stunning finch we get is the Yellowhammer, more like a bunting than a finch. But it's got the beak with the triangular beak for opening seeds. Declining as well, folks, not doing so well, again, because of changes in agricultural policies and techniques. Not as many hedgerows and not as many weeds on the sides of the fields for them, and the grain crop as well, not enough food. So farming practices benefited them in the past, but now not doing so well. That's the Yellowhammer. And it makes a song that we always, when we're telling people how to remember it when they're learning to birdwatch over here, it says a little bit of bread and no cheese. And if you remember that, when you hear it, you'll know why we say a little bit of bread and no cheese, because that's exactly the way, the meter of the song that it makes. Wagtail, in North America, you don't have so many wagtails and pipits. They're only confined to very small areas of North America. This is the pied wagtail, which is very common. It likes to nest in crevices, like in this stone wall. An insect eater. And its cousin then, the meadow pipit, which you see lots of them. It's like a miniature thrush. Again in May, all out hunting for food for their young. And the rock pipit is another one. Beauty, really, really nice. The skylark, again in North America, you've got a number of species of skylark. I think meadowlark is what you've got. Whereas the original name lark and skylark comes from this bird, which again is on decline in Ireland and Scotland because of changing farming practices. Beautiful singer, and it rises up into the sky. Sometimes it will go so high that it almost goes out of sight, but it continues to sing continuously. It's just magnificent song, and we get to see them again west coast of Ireland and the west coast of Scotland too, the skylark. So we look forward to seeing that one. This one's looking at you, the stonechat. They get the name. This is a female and this is the male. The little bird, only about yay big, and they get their name because the sound they make sounds like two stones being knocked together, making a chack, 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 chack sound. The stone chat is what it's called. And they're a lovely little bird too. And we often do our walks along the coastal paths and things like that. And this is a bird we'd be looking out for on those walks, the stone chat. The swallow, we get a lot of migrants, summer visitors, and they're all in May when we're there. The barn swallow, you've got barn swallow as well in North America. We have it too. And they come from Africa. They spend the winter in Africa, south of the Sahara. So we'll get them, and they'll nest in the barns and indoors. And here's a group of hungry young ones. And as soon as the parent arrives, they're all up and they're begging. They're begging for their food. And they've got the yellow on the inside of the mouth, what we call the gape, and that allows the parent who's coming out of very often very sunny, bright light into a very dark barn or shed, and you know, where the hell are the kids? You know, where do I put the food? Well, nature is so fantastic. It's given the inside of their mouths a bright yellow color, so that it can see where the chick's mouths are, and the adult then knows where to put the food. Simple as that. That's the barn swallow. We get warblers. Our warblers in general are not at all as colorful as your fantastic warblers in North America. I'll give you that. You beat us hands down when it comes for the beauty of warblers. You've got such an incredible array of birds that you call warblers over there in North America. This is often as colorful as it gets. This is a chiff-chaff, and they'll be singing away, and they get their name from the sound they make. Chiff-chaff, chiff-chaff, chiff-chaff. Very small bird, again, coming from Africa, south of the Sahara. And this one is the northern wheat ear, spelled W-H-E-A-T-E-A-R. And they come again from Africa. And believe it or not, you've got wheat ears as well in North America. And as far as I know, the wheat ear is the only land bird that nests in North America but winters in Africa. They all go to Africa. Unlike a lot of the migrant birds you have in North America that go south parallel to our birds are going south to Africa, yours are going south to South America. The wheat ear breeds in North America, up high, up north, but it goes to Africa for the winter. It crosses over. Quite amazing. And they get their name from their tail, and it's quite a rude, the old name used to be from Old English or even Anglo-Saxon, was white arse, which means white posterior. And this is, you can see from this photograph why they called it that, because it's only when it flies you see the white that's on the tail primarily. And that's what, but the Victorians and later generations didn't like that name, white arse, so they changed it to wheat ear. Wheat ear means nothing. They don't eat wheat, they don't live in a wheat field, and they don't have external ears either. They have ears, but they don't have external ears. One of the rarest migrants that often people that are coming to us from North America want to see is the corncrake. And here's a group in Iona, which is probably the only place now where we have a chance of seeing them. And this is what they're all looking for. It's the corncrake. There it is. inside in the reeds. Some years we don't even see them. Sometimes we don't even see them. This is maybe the best shot you'll get of a corncrake. You're more likely to hear them than see them. And then we get rarities as well that come over from Europe sometimes during the spring migration, like this blue throat. So there's always a chance of something rare for Ireland and Scotland turning up. Now we're moving on to the water. You've got the grey heron. Very similar to your great blue heron. They're cousins, but they're a different species. Different species, the grey heron. You've got the oyster catcher. Again, similar to the North American oyster catcher, the American oyster catcher. They're cousins. They used to be called the sea pie, not because they made a nice dinner, but because pie, again, meaning two colors, like the magpie I told you earlier. Well, they used to call this the sea pie, which meant the black and white seabird. But now they call it the oyster catcher, which as far as I know is an American name for the bird that moved back to Europe, was brought back to Europe. Oyster catcher. Ringed plover, very like your semi-palmated plover, very, very similar. Beautiful bird, likes to nest just above the high water mark up on the shingle. So we got to keep an eye out for them because they nest on the ground like all the wading birds that we have here in Ireland and Scotland. Very few of them nest off the ground. So and if you're getting very close to the nest, they will actually pretend to have a broken wing like this one. And they lead you away thinking that, like, if you're a predator and you're trying to find some food, you might think, it's easier to catch the one with the broken wing. And it leads you away. And then when it's far enough away, it stands up and it flies off. And you can't remember where the nest was, where it got up off the nest. And it's a very clever trick that they use. They pretend to have a broken wing. Snipe, we can look out for snipe. I couldn't believe with North America that you actually, so a lot of people didn't think a snipe existed. And it was only when I started traveling with folk on Zegram trips that I discovered that there's a thing called a snipe hunt in North America, which we know nothing about. And apparently it was a way of keeping kids occupied by sending them off on what we would call a wild goose chase. But this is a snipe. They do exist. This is a snipe. And on our trip, there's a good chance of seeing them and hearing them. And they make a noise mechanically with their wings. And they put out these stiff feathers and they fly down towards the ground with the stiff feathers out at right angles. And when the wind blows through them at high speed, it makes a sound like it makes a kind of a sound like a goat. And the Gaelic or the Irish word for this moan on air, which is the goat of the air, because it reminded people of the sound of a goat. That's the snipe. We should get to see and hear them on the trip. They're fantastic as they display in the sky over their breeding territory. And here is one coming in close again. Newt swans, beautiful. They'll be pairing up and a lot of them pair for life once they do pair up. And we should get to see them. They're native to Ireland and Scotland. Eider, not so much in Ireland. Up north of Ireland you see some, but Scotland has lots of eider, the common eider, and we should get to see plenty of them too. Beautiful duck. Some geese, the grey lag goose, very common in Scotland, not so common in Ireland. Beautiful, beautiful bird. Beautiful, beautiful bird. And then getting on to the seabirds, we have the Arctic tern. We have common terns and sandwich terns as well. They'll all be breeding, and if you're very unlucky to get too close, they will attack you by trying to peck you on the head. They're the ones that make lots of noise and dive bomb you if you're coming in too close to the colony. The Arctic terns, keep an eye out for them. Sometimes called the sea swallows, actually. Skuas, the great skua we might see, especially in Scotland. Here's one at the nest, not too far away from the nest, displaying and threatening. And then there's the parasitic Jaeger, or the Arctic skuas. They breed in Scotland, where we might get to see some too. beautiful, elegant birds. Often you only see them at the sea, but they breed on land, not near the sea a lot of the time. Then you have the herring gull. This one was making a lot of noise one day when we were on one of our trips, the European herring gull. Black-headed gull is another one we'll definitely see. Beautiful bird. But as you can see, if you look closely, it actually doesn't have a black head. It's a chocolate colored head. But they are called black-headed gull for some reason, which I sometimes have trouble when I'm teaching people about bird watching, and I show them one in summer plumage and it has a hood like this, and I say, that's a black-headed gull, and they tell me, no, it's not black-headed. I said, that's what they call it, black-headed gull. Beautiful bird. They often nest in marshy areas inland and then spend the winter on the coast and in estuaries. That's the black-headed gull. And when you get onto the sea cliffs then, and there's lots of sea cliffs on the west coast of Ireland and Scotland because it's hammered in the winter by the winter gales from the westerly and southwesterly winds that are prevailing over here. And you end up with these fantastic places for seabirds to nest. Even one of the crows comes and nests there. The chough, with its red legs and its red beak. A bird we often look out for. You don't see too many of them on the west coast of Ireland and Scotland, but they're well worth looking out for. The kittiwake is fantastic. Really delicate gull, beautiful, beautiful gull. Yellow beak. And they're amazing as they fly past the ship. You can get some nice photographs like this if you're lucky. You stand down the back deck with your camera and just, they can come very, very close. You don't even need a big lens. But they love nesting on precipitous cliffs. And the nest often seems like it's suspended on air. Like this one I took up in Scotland. They use grass and their own poop. And that glues the grass together. But it must be like a super glue, because the nests don't fall off. And they can rear 2 or even 3 chicks. You can see there's two there to the right of the adult, right on the edge of the cliff. That's the kittiwake. And it gets its name from the sound it makes. It has a bit of a stutter. It's kickity-wake, kickity-wake. But we call it the kittiwake. Lovely bird. And then you have the auks. These are all what you would call common murres. We would call the common guillemot. And they love the geology that Tom Sharp will tell you all about when we're there, because they get these lovely little ledges where they can lay their single egg. And here's a big group of common murres or guillemots. And the west coast of Ireland and Scotland is one of the best places anywhere in the world to see the seabirds. It's truly fantastic. And here's the common murre, the guillemot up close. Handsome bird. And with a bit of luck, you'll get close views of them too. And then there's the other one, the cousin, the razorbill, which is this one, which has a little bit of a white on the beak and a bit of face marking as well. A stunning bird. And these hunt underwater like penguins. They've evolved to look like penguins, even though they're not closely related. But they hunt underwater for sprats and that. They dive underwater and flap their wings underwater. They don't use their feet. Black guillemots as well, which are usually found down at the end of a sea cliff. They like to nest in the boulders, and they lay 2 eggs instead of 1. Beautiful birds. The shag, we call it the shag, and in North America you seem to prefer to use the word cormorant for all of these. They get the name shag because of the shaggy top. It's from Old Norse skega, meaning a protrusion, or often a beard as well it can be. And that's where the word shag comes from. So there's a group in the cormorant family that have the crest on the front of the head, and we often refer to them over this part of the world as the shag. See them all here in their breeding plumage. They lose those tufts as the breeding season goes on. But we should see plenty of them. Here's one on a nest. They don't usually mind us looking at them. You get great views of the seabirds. And then the cousin, the cormorant as well. They've got the tuft out of the back of the head. You can see that on the bird, especially on the right. They have the tuft coming from the back of the head. They're the cormorants. the great cormorant, similar to yours. Then the fulmars, beautiful birds. They're like, they're little cousins of the albatross with stiff wing beats, procellariform. They've got tube noses, beautiful little birds. And again, lots and lots of them in Ireland and Scotland. Here they're having a little bit of a chat on St. Kilda. Beautiful, beautiful birds, the fulmar. And interestingly, they colonized Ireland and Scotland only in the last 150 years or so, really. 150 years ago, you would have had to go right up to the islands of Scotland, St. Kilda and places like that to see them. You wouldn't have found them anywhere else. Now they're everywhere. There's a cliff, no matter how big or small. And here it is on the nest. Beautiful bird with the sea thrift, the sea pink on the left. This is a little bit later in the season, having gone to seed. Hankshire waters. We get to see some of them again. They're cousins of the albatross. Birds of prey along the cliffs, the peregrine falcon. You'll see plenty of them if we're lucky, because they're always looking for unsuspecting seabirds along the cliffs, the murres or the gulls. And if we're lucky in Scotland, and even on the west coast of Ireland now, we might see a sea eagle. Here's one being chased by a raven. They're like a flying door. They're huge. But the real thing I love about, I mean, I love lots about wild Ireland and wild Scotland, but getting to these remote islands, as I said, this is the Skelligs where the monks built their little settlement back in the 6th century. But getting out here is really the edge. It's like the edge of the world, which is what these monks thought they got, to be close to God. It really is amazing, and you can only do it on the smaller ships, really, to get in close and see the detail and see all the seabirds that live on these remote islands. Of course, you can tell the islands that have lots of seabirds because there's lots of white on them. The guano, the poop, makes them stand out quite easily. And this is Skellig Beag, or Little Skellig, with over 25,000 gannets on it. Now we've got the Stack Lee on the right, and Stack and Armagh on the left, and Boré is off to the right, the group of islands near Kilda. And in the Kilda group, they've over 60,000 pairs of gannets. This is the Flannan Islands, and they have 5,000 pairs of gannets. The numbers are enormous. You know, for the whole trip, we're going to see literally hundreds of thousands of seabirds. It's quite amazing. And even if you're not into the birds that much, it's a spectacle that, you know, you'd want to be the worst skeptic not to be moved by the number of birds in such spectacular scenery. I mean, where would you get, you know, and these are big birds, wingspan of 6 feet, incredible. This is Noss in Orkney, which we often go to as well, weather permitting, if it's not too foggy. And you get the gannets there too, looking, thanks to Tom's geology, lots of lovely stratified layers of rock, giving lovely shelves for the gannets to lay their egg on. And here's one coming right by the ship. I mean, they're just amazing. They're like a small albatross, like a black-browed albatross, a little bit smaller than that. But they're our biggest seabird, the gannet. Beautiful. And here's one coming straight at us. Just fantastic. I mean, really, really beautiful birds. Almost there, folks. I hope you're hanging in. As those who know me, I just get carried away. And this is where I should have a script, but I don't. We go with the flow and see what comes into mind. So this is the gannet, northern gannet. You have them in North America as well. You've got big colonies, especially in the maritime Canadian area, in Quebec. But here we have them, as I say, along the west coast of Ireland and Scotland. And all these photographs you'll get on the Wild Ireland and Scotland trip. And I'm going to finish, because I know it was in the advert, the puffin. So many people that go on the trips and they want to see a puffin. Even if they've never gone bird watching before, they want to see a puffin. Well, let's hope we get to see some puffins on the trip. This is the shot the photographers want. They want the puffin with all the fish in it. We might be lucky. Often it's later in the season when the chicks have hatched that you get the fish there, but we might be lucky. We might be lucky. Again, we can't promise anything, because the worst thing you can do coming on the trip is try and make up some sort of a I must see list, because you're going to be setting yourself up from some disappointment, and then you won't have the surprise of seeing all the fantastic other things that you didn't think you were going to see at all. So the puffin, sometimes this is the view you'll get. Marketing in Zegram would not be too happy with this shot, but this is sometimes what you'll see, a puffin from the ship swimming away, and often people are there, where's the puffin, where's the puffin? They're very small. They're really small in body length, a little bird, and they actually can fly the whole Atlantic. I often hear people saying they're very poor flyers. They're not poor flyers at all. They can fly the Atlantic for the winter and come back to their nests in Ireland and Scotland ready for the next season. No problem. And they stop along the way. Fantastic little birds. But we do get to a few places, particularly in Scotland, on this trip coming up, Staffa and up in Sombra Head, where you can see the puffins from the land. And they'll come flying around every now and again, and people will be taking shots of them in flight, and they might get one like this. For like the 9 million shots I have of puffins that you're not going to see, this is the 1 or 2 that I'm showing you. They fly by, they can be very fast, but we give you a reasonable amount of time to see them, and we're usually out there early, so we often have the place to ourselves. Not always, but we usually do. That's one of the things with the Zegram trips. We often get in first, and you get the place to yourself. And here we are with a group, and look at the puffins. You can see them on all the little black dots down at the bottom, and they nest in burrows. And they're so used to people on Staffa and up in Sunburg Head as well, that they don't get bothered, which is why you can get a nice close-up shot like that. So fingers crossed, fingers crossed. We usually do well with the puffins, but as I say, you can never say never, or can you never say always in this part of the world. So I'm just finishing up now, folks. It's been a bit of a mad sort of quick whistle-stop tour of wild Ireland and wild Scotland. Don't want to give everything away in the show. You'll have no reason to come over to us. They're far better in real life. Apart from myself, you're probably better off leaving me on Zoom. But for the birds and that, yeah, definitely you got to see them in the flesh. And I hope it's giving you a little flavour of these beautiful islands where I live, and the magnificent wildlife that we have. And while some people don't like to see the dark clouds, I'm afraid the most beautiful sunsets often need some nice clouds on the horizon, like this sunset over the west coast of Ireland on a beautiful May evening after we get back from always a good day. There will always be something. So with that, I would like to thank you all for coming along, and as we say in Gaelic, or as I say Irish, Gorav Mila Ma Agut, which means thank you very much. Thank you very much, folks, for tuning in. I hope you enjoy that.